But thank you for popping in on the podcast. I had the pleasure of enjoying what you sent. The chocolates, yeah, because I shared the dates with my sister and the truffle, and we both were just like, what kind of sorcery is happening with these chocolates right now? Because I think the thing that hasn't happened for me like with food in such a long time is that I haven't been surprised by it
Mhm.
in a long time, and that's what I'm like dying for at this point is like make me something, send me something, even mix me a drink. I don't care.
Mhm.
Something that's going to like surprise me, that's going to like,
I hear
take me
you.
off course a little bit and just go, okay, wait a minute. Let me make sure that was not a fluke. Because I had the truffle first, and then I was like, okay, hold on. So I grabbed my sister. She was in the middle of something. I'm like, I need you to stop and have this truffle real quick because I'm not sure that that's what just happened, and I just need other people to confirm that this was correct. Because it's just I was like, that moment where you realize like everything has been like thought about and it's been
Yeah.
carefully taken care of, and then it's all put together. I was, like if I could have taught any of my interns at any point in the kitchen, like that is the point I always wanted to drive home, that each thing makes a difference and like there is no like step to throw away, and there's
No.
everything matters. And so
No.
yes, so I thoroughly enjoyed everything. I even well, the figs. Oh my god. Okay, so first question is there a little cashew mixed in with the peanut?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
because I have this terrible cashew allergy, right?
Oh my God, stop.
Girl, don't even worry about it. And so I was like, I'm gonna get into these figs. We're gonna have a good time. And so I got about halfway into one fig. I was like, okay, this got cashews, but I'm gonna finish this and take a Benadryl because I
Stop.
don't care. I'm prepared to be reckless. It's fine. I'm going to do this anyway. So I sat there for the rest of the night, just throat scratching, but happy as I don't know what. I'm like, this Benadryl is going to kick in. It will be just fine. And
I'm not
yes, but
sure if that's like the greatest compliment I've ever gotten for our chocolate,
that's
or if
someone
I
that's going
should
to
be
eat
like
your food
deeply
against their
disturbed.
own. I'm going to eat this against my own better judgment and best interest because it's that. It was because I don't get to eat cashew, and like that combination, you just add that level of like fat and richness and sweetness that you typically don't get from, because peanuts can sometimes come across as a little brittle
Yeah, dry.
and like a little bitter, and so the cashews just balance it perfectly. I'm like, I don't care. I do the same thing with like super spicy food. Like once a year I'll have like Indian food and just
Get the Benadryl
live with
ready.
the consequences. It's fine. It's worth the pain sometimes. It really is. So I was like, so thank you for sending everything. I ate everything without regret. And I still
So
have
happy to.
some of the coffee nibs left. So I'm just like slowly trying not to get rid of all of it in one shot. I ate like all of my Girl Scout cookies in a few days, and I'm like, you have to stop eating this
You
recklessly. So
so happy
so like
to.
talk to me about like, after eating the chocolates and like getting to a place where you're just kind of eating the person, you're connecting with the person's expression of something,
Mm,
like you want to now know like, okay, how did you get here? Because
mm,
not everyone's doing what you do and as well as you do it, and
mm,
that's like always the first thing that stands out. And then reading, like digging into your backstory and reading like the information about like the brand and the
mhm,
stories behind like your family connection to chocolate and like
mhm.
that ancestral connection. Like how did you find yourself like here?
Um, it's a windy story, but I think that, some of the best ones are.
Yeah.
I had been working in corporate America. I worked at Under Armour for a few years, and while I was there, I was working with their nonprofit section, working with one of our local organizations here, just kind of establishing nutrition and fitness programming for youth. Really loved it. I'd had a background in nutrition counseling even from before Under Armour that I was able to put into action, which felt really good and really fulfilling. And then somewhere along the way, the funding for the program was cut, but I decided that I wanted to continue along that path. So I made the decision to leave Under Armour. I was in my 20s, so it was easy to leave things.
Yes. Isn't it always?
Yeah. Um, and continue to pursue what I was doing. And along the way, it was this very like serendipitous moment of I literally found a postcard that was advertising raw chocolate classes. And
Wow.
I thought to myself, okay, I'll try this. I had gotten the comment lots of times that people were looking for a way to transition from refined foods to more holistic ones, and they were
Mhm.
missing their sweets and they were missing their treats and all of that. So I thought, okay, well, this could be like good for my business. I can, use this as a supplement to what I was doing, not like the
Gotcha.
thing that I was doing.
Yeah.
So it was as much of a surprise to me as to anyone when literally that class was in June of 2012. And then in September of 2012, just a few months later, we had our first customers for chocolate.
Wow.
So it was like a super
Wow.
quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Um, I think that the thing that surprises people the most is that there wasn't like this intention behind I'm going to start a chocolate business one day and I'm going to be a chocolate maker and it's going to look like this and this is how it's going to roll out and this is how we're
Mm,
going to do. There just wasn't any of that behind it. I was really just taking it day by day and just doing what came to me. Um
that's
and that
it's the
was
best way to do it.
that's the only way that I
Honestly,
could do it.
it's the best way to do it.
Right? Like, there wasn't any of this, like, nepotism where everyone in my family had made chocolate and there was already, like, this shop established that I could walk into, and just we were doing everything from the beginning.
Mm,
And I think that if anyone would have told us, the challenges that could come with that, and we were just so naive going into it and just being, just paying attention and going with whatever came our way. And of course, that's 9 years ago. And then to learn now of this ancestral connection, it's like, well, I
oh,
mean, it was a postcard, but also
also, I'm like,
also
however
there were these other cues that we were following that we had no
yeah,
idea, that
wow.
existed. And, I started the business with my dad all of those years ago, so it was very much like this family, this family vibe, and it's always been that way and, continues to be that way.
I love it.
So
How did your dad get involved? Like, it's so because I think about my dad, and because when I was reading your story, I was like, "Okay, I mean, yeah, I could see because they are like dads are like huge cheerleaders, and
Right,
they really are
right.
like, I just want to sit back and like watch you figure it out, and like, so like, how did he really go? You know what? Let's do this like together, and like let's participate, and like, what was his interest in the whole thing?
He had just retired, from working, I guess, 37 years as a,
Sounds right.
civilian in the with the government, so he had
That sounds
been
about right.
working for a lot of years. He was ready to enjoy his retirement and
Yes.
travel and do his thing, and then meanwhile, here I am tripping over postcards and stuff and being like, "Hey, dad, you've got time on your hands. What do you think? You wanna help me?"
Right.
And he was so, I joke, but he was so invested from the start and, like, just so
Oh.
excited. And I think that having worked, like, he worked a government job for so many years, like, doing a
Mm,
passion project after all of that and doing work that was entrepreneurial and where we could make our own rules and is the complete opposite of the rigid structure of
yeah,
government work. So I
this
think
is
it was
true.
intriguing to him on that level. Of the two of us, he's the lifelong chocolate lover also. Like I mean, we'll get to that, but I was a gummy bear Skittles gal.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. She was like, "I like a fruity candy."
Oh, yeah. That was
Yeah.
my jam. So again, this was very, like, seemingly out of left field in the
It was
beginning.
wow.
Um
It's funny because, like, when I told my parents, because my dad it's funny, my dad worked for the United States Postal Service for 40 years,
Oh,
so I
wow.
completely understand that.
Yeah.
He retired very recently, so,
Uh-huh.
like, he now spends his time, like, gardening and, like, sitting outside and just catching breezes and not having to go into work at night, and so at this when I called him and I told my mom, like, I wanted to become a chef because I made a huge pivot. I was working in, like, marketing and graphic design before I became a chef. So I was used to working in an office, used to working in a cubicle, used to doing all of that stuff. And like most people who knew me growing up, they were like, she's very like scholastic in nature. So I'm like huge reader. That's what you found me doing. If you like saw me dip out and disappear, you could probably find me balled up in the corner with a handful of books. And so it was this, oh, she's going to be like an attorney or something like that. I was that kid. And so like when I was making these announcements about I'm going to get into food, okay. Really? And I think my dad's response was like, "A chef? Really?" It was just like, "Yeah, why not?" And so it was I understand that like people don't it took something to like pull you into that space and like make you consider yourself to be a part of it. And I was just like, I had it, food had always been in the background. I had spent most of my Saturday mornings watching whatever public television had to offer before there was actual food networks and things
Mhm.
like that. And so, you know, that stuff was always intriguing, but I just never I was the kid getting kicked out of kitchens as a kid because I was not super graceful. So like burns, cuts, all the things. And so my mom would always be like, "You don't have to be in here right now. You can come back when it's time to clean up, but do not." Because it was, you know, you're going to drop something, you're going to spill something. And so like getting into food was odd because people like none of my family knew if I could cook or not. Really, they were like, "I don't understand where this is coming from. Why?" And I just was like, I saw it as a very easy it's one of those things where I saw it as a really simple transition because it's like the work I'm doing now is in service to people. The work I would do in food is in service to people. So I didn't see how like me changing my activities changed my why. And so I didn't
Mm.
struggle with that. I didn't struggle with that transition at all. And so people were like, "How
Mhm.
did you?" Because all this time I've worked in food because I actually got my first restaurant job in 2012. So it was
Oh,
like we've been on these parallel paths.
yeah.
And
Good
so I
year.
got into my first kitchen and logistically I didn't know if I belonged. I didn't my you know I had an instructor in culinary school who like pulled me aside after a class and was like, "I should tell you like don't spend too much time in culinary school." And I was just like, "I'm sorry, you know, you've paid all this tuition." And you're like, "What? What are you talking about?" At first I thought he was going to tell me this is not for you. I was going to have like a Simon Cowell moment from like
Right.
American Idol.
Right.
And then he was like, "All the things that we would be able to teach you in culinary school, you already know. You already possess these things." And I'm like, "I've never worked a day in food as a professional ever." He's like, "But you have the innate qualities of a person who can like manage a kitchen." And I was just like, "Okay, okay." He was like, "So don't spend too much time in culinary school. Like, get these
Wow.
basics and get out of here. Get into a good kitchen because you'll learn so much more there than you ever will in culinary school." And I was just like, so I sat with that for like a whole semester. Like, and every time he saw me, he would pull me aside and tell me the same thing.
Wow.
"Oh, you're still here? Why are you still here? You should find a good kitchen." And I'm just like, "What?" So like my first kitchen job was in New York at this restaurant. I interviewed for that job when I lived in Nashville via Zoom when Zoom
Wow.
first came out.
Wow.
And no, I'm sorry, Skype. Via
Wow.
Skype. And I got here and I had no clue like what I was doing. I'd never worked on the line before. I'd been working in catering. And I got on like that first dinner service. And when I was done, I was just like, I am thoroughly convinced this is what I should be doing.
That's
And when I left
oh
that job, the chef was like, "You are probably the hardest working person I
oh
have
my
ever had the
gosh.
pleasure of working with." He was like, "I know this is your first job. You have a lot to learn." He's like, "But if you do not give up, you will be really good at this." And I was just like, "Okay, all right, ancestors, Black Jesus and African angels,
Wow.
thank you." So yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it's so, and it's funny because I'm thinking about your postcard, and it's just like you know, the ancestors were like, "Go ahead and slide her this card.
Oh, yeah. You only need a whisper.
We know she can. She's not sure yet, but she'll
Mhm.
figure it out very quickly."
Mhm.
And like the fact that you went from like this class to first customer in such a short amount of time. And,
Mhm.
like, I'm learning more and more, like, in the last year, like, these risks that people are taking that are paying off. I think that's where, if the pandemic has not gifted us anything else, it's this opportunity to, like, take the bigger risk,
For sure.
and, like, go ahead and spend space, failing or making mistakes and learning and, like, and getting up. And I'm excited to see people take the risk. Oh, I didn't think I could do that before. I didn't think that was something I would love. And then just
Go with
soaring
it.
when they get in there. So
Yeah.
now that first class for you,
Yeah.
like, what was that? Well, how walking into that and just going, okay, we're gonna do this. Like,
Like, honestly, there was just still so much I didn't know
mm,
that there wasn't a whole lot of intimidation. There wasn't a whole lot of, because 'cause I'm a lifelong learner. I'm like
yeah,
you, find me in a corner with a book. So, I mean, and still to this day, it could be related to my work, it could be completely unrelated, but I'm a curious person.
yeah,
I love a good story. I love listening. I love reading. So, like, it wasn't like just being in that environment of learning something new and being exposed to something new. That wasn't weird for me. Like,
mm,
that was fun for me. That was like,
yeah,
oh, this is this thing. But as I was in the class, it was like by the end, I knew that it was more than just an exposure to a new thing. Like by the
ah,
end, I knew that, oh, this is actually something special. Like I got that little feeling of, oh, this is a little star along my way. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like how you can look
yeah,
back and see like, oh, well, I met this person, so then I met this person and I did this, so then I did that and this and that and that. But even in that moment, I knew that I was in the midst of something special. Still, I
mm,
didn't make any plans necessarily for what it was going to look like or what I was going to do. And um, it, I the romance of it was quickly replaced by just, like, the grind and the hard work and
yeah,
all of that. But in the class itself, to answer your question, I just felt like this is something special. I'm enjoying learning this thing, and I can do this. Like,
mm.
this is something that I can do.
Oh,
And
I
that
love
was
that.
it. That was all I needed to know to do it the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, it just unfolded in an organic way. And again, that doesn't mean that it wasn't hard. That doesn't
Right,
mean that
right.
it wasn't a grind and that uh, I mean, it was those first couple of years was wild. It was crazy. It's one of those moments, and I feel this way also. Like, I don't know about you, but I feel this way too if I look back at, like, dorm life or, I was an athlete, so, like, looking back on those years, there's certain things that I look back on and I'm like, "How did I ever?"
Ever.
Literally could never do it again. Would
Yeah.
never. I could never do that. Like, there's so
Oh, yeah.
many moments like that and this
Who
is
was that
one of
person
them.
doing that?
Like, I hope
Yeah,
this works out because
right.
never starting anything
For again. Nope. And it's funny because, like, even doing, like, this podcast, I was I've spent most of my adult life starting things. Like, "Ooh,
Mhm,
this is a great idea. I should try it," I
mhm.
should try, because it's that if I wait for other people to, like, come upon this thing and, like, create a solution and then engage in that solution, we're gonna be sitting here forever. So I was like, do it with, like, 80% of the information, figure it out. I'm a
Right.
huge, like, build the bridge as you cross it type of
Oh,
person,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
sometimes you have to. Like, there are moments where I am more calculated and a lot more strategic, but on the whole, I'm just like, well, the longer we just wait and sit around for a solution, like, if we all have parts of a solution and we're working together, like, we'll have at least 92% of a solution is better
Right,
than, like, nothing.
right.
So can we at least start and let the, like, 8% reveal itself?
Totally.
And yeah, there's plenty of spots in life where I was just like, I can't believe I did that. And why would anyone let me?
Yep,
I
yep.
Someone should have stopped me at some point. I should have no business doing that.
Uh-huh.
But like you gain so much from those types of moments because
Yeah.
you can look back and go, oh, because some things are just about telling you like you can do it, like like pushing your limits a bit, and we impose limitations on ourselves, and even if you're kind of a high risk person like me, even then you're still like, I'm imposing this risk, like this is the line I won't cross, and then
Mhm.
something comes along and goes, are you sure?
Mhm. Mhm.
And you're like, well, if I have to, if I must. Now, is there I was like, if I have to. Like the podcast alone, like that was a huge risk.
I'm sure,
First,
yeah.
I also put like to get past like the basic human things like hearing your voice on tape, figuring out skills that you don't know you don't have, like audio,
Mhm.
like recording audio and producing audio and editing it and everything else, and you're just like, that can't be too bad, because you grew up as the kid who would like listen to the radio and have like the record, play, and pause
Yeah,
button
right.
ready to go
Yeah,
when that song came
yeah,
on, and like so you figure how much harder could it be than that,
yeah.
and like you're waiting for the DJ to shut up so you can like get the beginning of the song, and so it's like, well, I mean, if it's that
Such
kind
a
of
nice
energy,
memory.
oh my god, okay, and you got cassette tapes, and
Yeah,
I also I'm like, you remember the little the label, and you're just like, what songs are.
absolutely. Yeah,
I was telling people, kids won't enjoy the tactical experience of those things,
I
unfortunately.
know, I
There's something
know.
to that. There's
Yeah,
something to that.
yeah.
So, but yeah, like I think part of I will attribute a great part of my ability to take larger risks to how we grew up, is
Mhm,
the fact that if you wanted something, we did not have these technologies to
mhm.
accomplish them, and we had to really figure out how to do them. Most of the technologies that like current generations engage with now come from us because we were trying to figure out how to get something done. And so now you have this technology that allowed you to do it. And so like the fact that we went from like having to record the radio to like streaming music, like there's a direct link to that activity. And so I think a lot of the ways we grew up does speak to like our ability to take larger risks and problem solve. Like we were left to our own devices a lot of times as kids to solve conflicts, to come up with solutions, to figure out how to entertain ourselves. Because I don't know about anyone else, but my parents were like, no television during the school year. You can watch it during the summer. There's nothing but reruns anyway. And then you spent most of your time outside with your friends.
Yep,
Learning how to ride a bike, learning how to skate, learning how to play flag football or whatever it was. And I think all of those experiences cumulatively put us where we are now to like take these risks and
yeah,
problem solve in the middle of it, like
yeah.
kind of go, okay, that's not, we're able to like pivot very quickly in these situations. So when the pandemic started last year and everybody was like, see, Generation X guys, we have things to teach everyone. We do. And I'm like, we do. It's like we lived that life. We lived the life of our parents worked,
Yeah,
and you had a key under the mat or a key
yep,
around your neck. You had to let yourself in, make yourself a snack, get your
yep,
homework done. You had to really self-manage. And so I think that speaks a lot to how entrepreneurial most of us are now.
totally.
And so it was like, well, I'm going to get this business up and going. And people are like, what? And you're just like,
That's it.
I
Yeah,
mean, we come from those people.
yeah.
So you're like, I definitely want to talk about like some of the chocolate you sent me and like where some of this comes from.
Mhm.
Um, so because I like the stuffed date, the fig, those things are so they speak so heavily of like ancestry and like African culture and Black American culture, which you do not get in chocolate. Chocolate is extremely European, as everyone knows, in this country. And then with the conversation that Ghana is currently having with Switzerland and not exporting any more cocoa beans to them, and like there's just this huge moment I think right now, and I am excited to see like yourself steering chocolate back towards kind of its origin spaces. You have this kind of uh South American space with chocolate with like the Mayans and the Aztecs and those types of things. And then you have like that African space of chocolate and like cacao beans growing there and those types of things. So like those two things, like the dates and the figs,
Mhm.
where was like was that moment kind of a reflection of that ancestral moment you had, like discovering that about yourself, or
It
was
came
that something that's
before, and that's
okay?
which feels very cosmic. It feel
Yeah.
and it replicates throughout my career so far. Like I'll do something and then later its space in that ancestral conversation comes back to it comes to fruition.
Mm,
So I could think that it comes from, very just non-related beginnings. Like for instance, the date popper is what you're talking about. It's a
yeah.
organic medjool date that has cacao nibs and raw honey and salt inside of it, and then it's dipped in chocolate. So where did that come from? It came from the endings, and you'll appreciate this as a chef. Is just that at the end of the day, you have all kinds of just random stuff lying around from other stuff that you made. I've got some
True.
nibs over here. I've got the salt, obviously. I've got some melted chocolate over here that I didn't
Mm,
use up, some pieces of date, and that was always just my end of workday snack that I would make for myself, just putting all that random stuff together
ooh.
and dipping it in whatever's left, and then that would be what I would eat. So for a long time, that's what the date popper was, and then finally one day, I made it for someone, and they were like,
They had the same moment
probably
I had. Like, I
Yeah,
didn't know I needed this.
yeah,
I
yeah, like that, Jinji, you should probably put that on
Mhm,
the menu, just
mhm.
saying.
Yeah.
Not trying to tell you how to live your life,
Nope.
but this is really good. And, when it's just to me, the end of day scraps, like, I liked it, but and then
So
the
good.
fig actually started out being filled with chocolate and dipped in chocolate. And then that was a similar thing of, oh, well, we have this peanut butter left over. Let's just do that. And we did that for months before that anyone ever saw that. That was just like the shop, our little shop treat.
Oh,
And then
well,
finally
thank
one day
you.
we figured out how to like actually do it. And
Oh my
um,
god. Those I anyone to anyone listening, like, just don't overrun her website with these orders, y'all, but do yourself a favor when it feels right. Because it's the way you didn't realize, like, that's how you've always wanted to eat chocolate. Like, that's the thing that you were looking for. Like, okay, you've been shoving, like, almonds in it and caramel in it and a bunch of other things, and then you get this moment where it's just, like, everything seems so closely related to each other, like, they come from the same earth, they come from the same place, they live together that way. And like most chefs, we kind of do the whole if it grows together it goes together type of vibe.
mhm.
And so it feels the same way, like, why hasn't this happened before now? Like, this needs to be you just wow. Now your truffle technique, which again is, it feels right. It feels more right than like my, because most people go in and you'll have the truffle like that's been shaped either in the
Yeah.
hand, or it has like the tempered shell,
Mhm.
and because you're getting like
Mhm.
commercially made truffles. And so those were just like, again, like me and my sister bit into one, and she didn't, the initial like bite wasn't the thing. She got into it a little bit and then was like, what was it? I was like, exactly, exactly. You didn't realize you had been doing that all wrong, right? And like you just feel like I this whole time we've been eating this incorrectly, and now someone's finally done it correctly. And thank you. So like that technique, was that something you got from like that chocolate class? Was that something you had seen, or it was just like kind of a organic,
So
hey, this is
here's
how
the
we're gonna
thing
do it?
again, and I'm gonna start to sound like a broken record,
No,
I
you're fine.
know.
I keep asking the same question. You're fine.
I I
I'm like,
I didn't know another way to do anything.
mm,
Again, I just had no frame of reference for chocolate making really, not as a consumer nor as a producer. I just started figuring things out the way that made sense to me. I didn't have this like love of a certain truffle that I had had at this one place that kind of formed my perception of what that would be like. It was just, I want the texture to be kind of like this. And I feel like I wanted to taste really, really chocolatey and not have, so nothing we
mm,
have has dairy in it, mainly because I'm allergic to it, but also just because we wanted to have a really strong chocolate flavor. Um,
wow.
And that's because that was what my idea was. Like, that's
Yeah.
just what I thought it should be like. And everything else felt like it would be a distraction. So to make a ganache in a traditional way with heavy cream felt like a distraction to me.
Mm,
We do tempered chocolate, but to put tempered chocolate on the outside of this truffle felt meaningless to me. I thought, why do we need to do that if we can
yeah.
just have it like this? Um, so I don't know. I feel like that was the gift of having created something from literally scratch, was just
Yeah.
designing it in a way that that made sense to me at the time. Um,
Yeah.
so I
I'm sitting here sitting with the fact that you said you don't put dairy in any of it, and I'm just like, and yet again, we've been doing this all wrong. I just there's I think because a lot of things like Western food culture is so weird because it's like we want that example, we want coffee, but please put 3/4 dairy in the cup
right,
and
we
add
want
as much sugar as possible
right.
and then give me like a quarter cup of espresso. And you're just like, so you really didn't want any
You wanted a
coffee.
milkshake.
You wanted something else. And
Yeah.
so the same thing with chocolate. It's like, are you sitting with that chocolate? Do you know? Because it's hard to know like where it comes from and what's been done and how someone's treated it and taking care of it. If you're throwing a bunch of sugar and
Mhm,
dairy into it, but people are so used to eating it that way that you're just kind of like, oh, this doesn't have the same mouthfeel or anything. And my point being, you've managed to achieve those same kind of like luxurious, buttery mouthfeels that people are used to with really high quality chocolate without
mhm,
those mechanisms. And so that's where I'm always like, that for me is infinitely harder
uh-huh,
than the other way because you're like, okay, so how do we get that same experience across
right,
without those crutches
right,
at that
right.
point? So I'm just like, but I mean, honestly, you're nailing it because I was just like, I don't know what I've been eating this whole time, but it wasn't this. And I've been thinking a lot about, like, specifically with Black women and our relationship to like luxury
Mhm,
and what that really looks like, what that word really means, and like how it's expressed and how we're told it's supposed to be expressed.
mhm,
And so, like, that, I think that was like the whole of my experience. So, every time I ate something new or tasted something new, it was like that's the word that kept coming to mind. Like, there was this like luxurious moment where you feel really well taken care of when you're
mhm,
eating something. And I also, well, if you can get that across to a diner or someone eating your food, like that's the thing you want. That's the value exchange. Like
mhm,
you want them to eat something that you've prepared or you've made and go, I feel really well taken care of by this person.
mhm,
Because I used to freak my interns out a lot and tell them that like feeding people is a very intimate experience,
mhm,
and you aren't going to really get that experience outside of like, you know, a bedroom with a
mhm,
person. You've made something and now they've taken it in. And so of course that would be like, oh my God, chef, come on. I'm just like, guys, I just want you to respect the process. That's all I'm saying. You
mhm,
are preparing something with your hands, which means your energy and your spirit and your attitude and all that stuff goes in it. And you cannot discount the fact that someone's going to experience this, might be their only experience of you.
mhm,
And I think it's like
mhm.
Carla Hall who always says she doesn't cook when she's in a bad mood
Yeah,
for that reason.
yeah,
And so like everything always does, it feels really loving and like careful.
yeah.
And that's, thank you. Because it's rare that we get that experience with food. So I did want to jump into the ancestry part though, because I remember when I was reading that, I was just like, man, I wish my ancestry DNA results gave me something that brilliant because it doesn't say anything in mine about people who have done any of this. It's dang it. Because I took mine a few years back and I was just because, for me, I'm like, I don't really resemble a lot of people in my family. And so it's always been like challenging growing up to not feel like you belong to the people you belong to. And so, I thankfully grew into like looking a bit more like my mom, but I look like her mom. And I look like my dad. And so when, my dad's a bit of an introvert, so no one really ever sees him. And so it's like when I'm near, even when we've been in each other's presence and people are like, so who do you belong to? And I'm just like the only man in the room who shares the same lack of melanin as myself. that's who I belong to. And they're just like, oh, that's your dad. Oh, I always thought it's either, oh, I always thought your dad was white,
Mm,
or,
cute.
oh, okay. And I'm just like, right. Okay, guys. Right, right, right. But also, well, it affects, because like because we've been so deep into kind of these conversations around colorism within the community.
Mhm.
Like I always tell people, yes, it is, because my sister is on the opposite end of the spectrum of melanin as me.
Mhm.
So when we're together, it was always like, so is your dad white? And it was never a, oh, you have two different fathers. It was always like an accusation. So when I tell people, when you're processing that as like a 7, 8, or 9 year old, it's very different than when you're having this conversation with an adult woman. And so, like, as an 8 year old who just wants to belong to the family she's in, to hear that, you're just kind of like, you just never seem to internally fit anywhere. And like, I had this conversation with someone else, and we were talking about the same thing about ancestry. And it's like, when when you're growing up, your mom is your first standard of beauty.
Mhm.
And so if you're told you don't look like her, or you're never really connected to her in like the public, when people are connecting to people, they're like, oh, that's your mom?
Mhm.
And you're like, yes. And they're like, oh. You start to like have these questions like, well, what do I need to do to look more like her? Not because she's darker than me or lighter than me or her hair is straighter or curly. None of that counts. It's all like, if your mom's your first standard of beauty and the first person you consider beautiful is her, if you don't look like her, you start to question your own beauty. You start to question your own um, value in that way. And it's like, well, if I don't belong to her, if people can't obviously point to me and go, this is this person's
Mhm.
child, then where does that leave me? It kind of leaves you very isolated and insular
Mhm.
in your childhood. So you grow up kind of going, well, do I belong anywhere? And I think, like, when we are talking about ancestry, that's a big part of that question. Who do I belong to? What people do I belong to? Where did I come from? Why do I look the way I look and love the things I love? And so, like, I pursued my DNA test because of that. I was just like, kind of feeling lost in your own identity. And you're like, I
Mhm.
know I'm Black. I know I don't necessarily, like, as an adult, you learn, like, I don't have to prove that I'm Black because I am Black. Like, there's
Mhm.
nothing to prove there. At the same time, there's always that part of you that's like, but how Black are you?
Mhm.
Is Black a
Mhm.
spectrum? And you're like, no, Black is not a spectrum. It's not. You are, you're
Mhm.
not. And so that ancestry DNA test, like, was just so impactful for me. And it was like, okay, what can it tell me? What can it continue to tell me now about who I am and like why I do what I do? So I would love to hear like your experience about coming into that space, and like what
Sure.
what made you ask the question.
Well, well, first, it's funny because I think that my ancestral journey did start with ancestry DNA, like just seeing what that showed up.
Mm.
And I'm not sure if it like helped my agenda or hurt my agenda, because what I found out was that I was just like a stew from
Same.
everywhere. I'm talking about the Philippines.
Yep. I was like, Vietnam? Why? Yeah, I understand.
I mean, everywhere, like you name it, and I had some people over there. And so it was just, it started pretty innocently. I asked my dad about my grandfather. And my trouble was in I have a really small family, like super small, and we're kind of spread out. So not really a whole lot of like deep family traditions or um eh, family roots even always felt a little bit um it just always felt missing. It never felt really connected. Um and so I just started asking more questions. I wanted to know about my grandfather. I knew that he was a photographer. I knew that he loved to travel. So that's how the conversation started. I just asked my dad, like where was my grandfather's, his dad's last trip?
Mm.
Where did he take some of his last pictures? I kind of imagined myself taking some kind of like journey through like where he had been and where he went. I always traveled a lot. So I thought like, well, maybe that'll be like the purpose of my travel and obviously also trying to find just the purpose of myself and what I
Yeah.
was doing. I mean, at the time I was already making chocolate, but like, why am I doing this? Why am I making chocolate? This doesn't make any sense. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. Yeah, it has a following of its own and it's doing well, but that wasn't enough for me anymore. That wasn't a motivator for me. I'm much more motivated just in purpose and in belonging and being where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be there than I am any of like accolades or anything like that. Just didn't matter anymore. It's cute, but that has a lifespan for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and even like making chocolate, it hasn't ever been enough just to make chocolate and just to, be in a shop all day or experimenting with flavors. Again, it's fun, but that gets old for me. Like that's
Yeah.
not I've always known that in and of itself is not my purpose. Like I'm not here just to make chocolate.
Exactly.
Um, so I feel like that was the weight behind me when I started asking the questions of that seemed simple enough, like where was his last trip? But that's where I found out that his last trip was to Guyana. And so I started asking like, okay, well, why did he go there? And come to find out that's where we have family, and that's where my dad's side of the family is. And so that was finding out something that I didn't know. And then also learning like the part of the country that he went to, and then finding a photograph of him and who he connected with there. And she had this big machete just like strapped around her. And I mean, I've traveled enough to know that you don't like carry around a machete for a whole lot of things.
Right.
But you do if you are living on any kind of like a cacao property farm that's like part of the wardrobe. So I started to get really, really curious, like what is going on? So in looking it up, I found out that this area that he had traveled to, which was just outside of Georgetown, or the notorious Jonestown,
Ah.
um, what is a like their primary crop is chocolate, is cacao. And I was like, hmm.
Like, well,
Mm,
okay.
okay. Okay.
Alright.
Okay. You have my attention. Okay.
Right, right.
Um and that's where it all started, and actually where you've even found me today, because sort of on the unveiling of all of this, we couldn't travel anymore. COVID hit, and I had a kid, and it just everything kind of delayed, I guess, what the next step will be, which is to actually go there and do
Yeah.
some more digging around. But even the prospect that this could not even could be, but I know is a part of my reality and my professional reality, is that there's this very generational tie to what I'm doing, is so like affirming and validating
Mm,
to my place in this industry, um, to my purpose in continuing this legacy, and then gives me the power of choice over how I decide to present it to the world. Because no
yeah.
longer am I just like responding to what everyone else is doing. Like, this is the way that chocolate is supposed to be in this country. So this is the way that I'm going to do it. No, 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 no. Now I get to make the rules
Yeah,
because
yeah,
this is in
yeah.
my blood now. Like
Yeah.
I'm not looking at, all of these other like chocolate companies that are doing this very European presentation of chocolate, which again, I don't even like anyways. So
It all eventually tastes the same, so it's
and
unfortunate
there's
that you
and
can't.
there's something to be said for it. Like, I also don't want to discredit it, because But my point is that there's enough great chocolate bars. There's enough
Yes.
really good chocolate bars. You could have on your desk right now 30 great tasting bars of chocolate. We don't need another 72% chocolate bar,
No.
basically, is what my position is. But maybe what we do need is someone who's ancestrally inspired to make something that feels authentic to her own to her own path.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's what I'm
definitely.
starting to really unpeel back. And it's a difficult thing to do because, again, it's going back to our earlier conversation about taking risks
Yeah.
and doing things differently. Like, will I be a bona fide chocolate company, a chocolate maker, if I say to the world, I make chocolate, but I'm not making chocolate bars? Like, what does that make me at that point? And,
Mm.
on a good day, I can say to myself, well, I'm an individual. I make my own rules. I don't have to do anything the way that anyone tells me to do it. And, I don't have to respond to these expectations that, by the way, are pretty like grounded in this colonialist mentality.
Yeah.
Um, and then on a bad day, though, I can think to myself, like, oh, no one's going to take me seriously. My company is not going to be taken seriously if I'm not doing like the status quo chocolate bar. So it's something that I grapple with. And I think I become more and more clear, though, on the former, like as I continue to just read and research myself and have conversations like these, even. But it continues to be a journey, and this is where I am today. So
I love it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think once we've decided that most of those actions taken like to make the chocolate bar to standardize like how we cook or how we produce things is really attached to just commercialization of it
Mhm.
and that and capitalism.
Yeah.
So it's like how can we sell more of it to more people even if they don't eat it. I think that particular method um out of balance the way it is now produces a lot of waste in a lot of spaces. And I just, you'll realize like, oh, I ate half that chocolate bar and threw the rest out because I kept eating more of the same. Or it wasn't interesting, so I just left it. Or like it just produces that attitude that it's very disposable.
Mhm.
Whereas what you do is, for me, it's like that's like chocolate in the wild. That's
Mhm.
how you want to experience it. That's how you should be experiencing a plant, something that grows from the ground, and this is what it's capable of doing. Because if eating the cacao fruit on its own is a
Mhm.
whole experience in and of itself that most people will never have because it's we're now we're drying it. Same thing with coffee. It's like
Mhm.
we're drying it out, we're roasting it, it's
Mhm.
becoming something else. And it's still an incredible feat of like science and physics when you create chocolate from this
Sure.
pod. At the same time though, in and of itself, it's a fruit that's interesting and delicious to eat,
Yeah.
and people have sustained themselves on it for a long time. So this idea that you know producing it to look a certain way to create a certain volume so you consistently have the same thing, because it's the same thing in kitchens and restaurant kitchens. The goal is to produce the same plate of food
Mhm.
over and over and over and over and over again
Mhm.
consistently. And while you might be producing that plate of food for a new diner each time, more often than not, it's a return diner. It's someone, oh, that's my favorite thing on the menu. So
Mhm.
you make it over and over again to make sure it tastes the same way and
Mhm.
it's plated the same way. And the minute
Mhm.
you decide to go off script, people are like, but I'm like, I tell people the success of fast food has more to do with the economics of it and the consistency of it than
Mhm.
anything else. Like you go to McDonald's and those fries are always going to taste the same way
Mhm.
no matter how much they charge you
Mhm.
for them, no matter what changes in the world.
The
And
same.
I think I mean, there's been studies done about that, the amount of anxiety reduction people will gain when something is the same over and over and over
Yeah.
again. And it's just like, so yeah, to venture into these new food spaces, to really engage with your food it with more meaning and like in a deeper way, does require a little bit of you going outside of your anxiety free zones. But I feel like what you produce and what other people are producing right now, it's worth that risk for the eater. It's worth that risk for the consumer to experience something they haven't had before, but it's so delicious and it just kind of elevates what you've already been locked into. Like, look, I love a peanut butter cup. I do. I appreciate that. But to find peanut butter in a fig dipped in chocolate, like the all the points that you hit with a peanut butter cup, you hit with that fig. You get the peanut butter, you get the chocolate, but all of a sudden this, I love figs. So like that fig comes in and you're just like, huh, I
Mhm.
didn't think I needed these figs in this experience, but thank you for someone doing it. And like the way coming up with those things, we feel the same way, like of course with like family meal in most restaurants.
Mhm.
You're just kind of like,
Mhm.
why can't
Yep.
why can't we serve this to
Yep.
people? And it's like, ah, they won't like it. I'm like, but I think we're underestimating them a little bit. Like,
Mhm.
this is delicious.
Mhm.
This is the best thing I've eaten all week,
Yeah.
and we're not serving it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? And they're just like, well, it doesn't. I'm like, and this is my point. Like, let's grapple with that question.
Right.
Are we underestimating our diners? Are we underestimating consumers? Have we dumbed them down a little bit,
Mhm.
making these decisions for them?
Mhm.
So yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, for the future of the brand, I can't imagine, like I wouldn't even know what to do, like to like commercialize what you do, like to try to produce it in larger mass. I just think it would ruin it. But that's just me. It's like, don't put that in a factory. You're not Willy Wonka. Don't do it. Um,
That's where
like so
we
what
are. That's where we
Wow.
are. I mean, I don't know why I haven't been convinced by any logic of why we would wanna do that. I mean,
Yeah.
we we who work together are all self-sustaining. It's our only jobs, it's luckily, and it's been a great ride in that capacity. Um, so I'm not really sure why we would want to make it bigger, make it um, more commercial. It's not a goal that we have.
Nice.
Um, the goal is really only to keep exploring what we can do authentically with cacao. Um,
Mm,
and sometimes that means that we can make a batch of like 10 things. Um, Other times we can make big batches, but sometimes it means that we do small batch. That's kind of the
yeah.
what a micro business is. We can do what we want because, we're making our own rules. And I think that, something that you said earlier, I want to just add to, which is that people people I know that our experience has been that people adjust their expectations when there's a good story attached to it. So it might not look exactly like your fig. I can send you more figs and they'll all look different from the ones that you got before. It'll taste the same, but it will look totally different because
Yeah.
there's no anyone who's
Figs
ever
look this.
seen a fig.
Yep.
They all look
Right.
different.
Yeah.
Um, so when we put that story with it, and when we explain, the origin of a flavor or a combination or what it takes to make it, the expectation shifts to looking for a story rather than looking for the product to be any one way or another. It's like, I know that there's going to be
Exactly.
something good about that. So you can kind of manage the consumer expectation on a retail level in that way. I feel we've found it's just the storytelling. It's as much as what we do as the production. It's just as
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, I think people can, watching like cookbook production right now and like how people are engaging with like food media. Finally, I think losing some of the kind of gatekeeping energy that we
Mhm.
had
Mhm.
up until last year, and
Mhm.
a lot of gatekeepers found themselves out of a job.
Yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
like, oh, once we can pull the shades a little bit, open the doors, and connect people with the stories behind the food they're eating. Because I think that the pandemic did that too with food. That we kind of pulled the curtain back, and people discovered that when my food gets to my door, at least 8 people have touched it,
Mhm.
like, or have been involved in it, and that there's real people back there. There's real
Mhm.
stories happening.
Mhm.
There are dishwashers and bussers and prep cooks and all types of people who are
Mhm.
involved in getting my food to me. And so, like, being able to connect story to food the way it's supposed to be, the way people deserve. Because I was told, well, what is sharing a meal? What is having dinner than just an opportunity to like share stories with each other over food? And
Mhm.
that's, I think, if we can keep those relationships being built for people, um I think we will see like organic reductions in like food waste, like all the challenges we have with environment and climate and things like that. What I think the component that's missing is the fact that things don't have stories attached to them, and that things are produced in high volume. So
Yeah.
if you have a million white t-shirts and there's no story for any particular t-shirt, how it was made and who made it. I mean, this like haute couture fashion, the reason
Right.
why you only make 3 of those garments is
Mhm.
because of how hard it is
Mhm.
for 8 women in a little workshop to make
Mhm.
8 of those garments, because you're hand sewing every single
Mhm.
bead and feather and you're hand painting every
Yep.
flower. So when you do, start to make these things more micro and start to help people understand that there's a person behind what you're eating or consuming, I find that you naturally have like a reduction in waste. You have people valuing things. They don't throw them out so quickly. So I feel like with food, like in food waste and how we are engaged with like agriculture right now, the more we can kind of push narratives behind these things, I think you're going to see people back away from this idea that I need 18 of them and I'm going to only eat 3 and throw the rest of them out.
Agree. Yeah.
It's like, oh no, there's a person like breaking their back to grow that and
Agree. Yep.
harvest it and get it to me. And no, all of my figs don't have to be the same size and
Right.
same shape. I don't
Right.
have to go in the grocery store and all the apples look exactly the same, so they have no flavor.
Yep.
um
Yep.
all of those things.
And it
So do
brings
you?
back a word from earlier. It
Yeah.
redefines what luxury is,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
you
Like, is
know?
it, because wasn't that always the definition of luxury? Like,
Mhm.
it was kind of this level of like exclusivity to it. Like,
Mhm.
oh, well, not everyone can get their hands on it, so it's a luxury product.
Mhm.
And like, oh, we only made 150 of those.
Mhm.
So that makes it a luxury product. And like, so why not engage with smaller brands doing small batches and making things beautiful in smaller numbers
Mhm.
instead of trying to go, oh, I need more of that, because it's just greed at that point. Can
Exactly.
you make 200 of these? Like, why?
Exactly.
What do you need
Exactly.
200 of these for? Eat
Exactly.
2 and sit down. Like, mm, I just, because it's funny, because I've had a lot more requests for the podcast. Hey, are you going to not are you going to interview, are you going to grow your guest list to be more than Black women? I was like, absolutely not. It is a luxury for you to get on here
Mhm.
and listen to, I think, what now we're at, considering all the ones that have not gone live yet, there's probably like 45 interviews with Black women working in these very specific spaces. I'm like, so you don't even know 45 Black women.
Right.
So let's start there.
Right. Right.
So the fact that you now can like be familiar with 45 different Black women who work in food, hospitality, and wine and beverage, and just like, did you know that many before now? You couldn't even name one. So no, I'm not shifting that. I'm just, that's not going to change. There's enough of us
Yep.
out here doing this work
Yep.
where I can go on for quite a few seasons
Yep.
before I have to like dig around and look for other people. So yeah.
Uh-huh.
So for the post pandemic, and it's not as hard to think about as it was like 6 months ago, but I'm looking at people and their behaviors and I'm just like, oh my God, it's going to be like Mad Max and Beyond Thunderdome for at least 9 months
Yeah.
leaving the house. Because after you see, I mean, seeing everyone's behavior for spring break, I was just like,
Mhm.
oh
Uh-huh.
no, this is not going well.
No.
collectively you have all lost your minds. But what do you like for the next few years, like after we're getting out of the pandemic, and like, what do you see for yourself and your work? I know having a new little one, in the picture now, but shifts a lot of those plans.
For sure.
so,
For sure.
so yeah.
Um,
Where do you want to take the brand in
you
the next couple
know,
of years?
I think that it's a little bit unpopular maybe what my idea is, and maybe like anti-marketing what my idea is. But like at any other point of my career, this is just me paying attention and me listening to myself and taking the cues. The pandemic has been huge for me, just like it has been for everybody else in different ways.
Mm,
But as I said before, I never saw myself making chocolate for the next 50 years. Like that's not what I ever saw myself doing. It
right.
always has felt like a transition point to something else. It's always felt like a part of the story rather than the story. It
Definitely.
always has felt like a chapter in the book, not the whole book.
Yeah.
Um, the point of what I do has never been, I've never claimed it to be chocolate. The point of what I do is people and connections and community and telling that story. Um, and this pause that we've experienced, I think if I'm brave enough, I think that this pause has signified something of a transition. So I believe that my company has legs, and I think that I have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful team that loves what they're doing and is making chocolate and exploring it, and they're responding to their own cues, like what they want to do in life and where they are right now. Um, for me, especially with having a baby, I don't go into the shop anymore really. And for a long time, I mean, between COVID and between having a kid that's not in daycare, I'm pretty much at home now. And I kid that I'm like the administrative assistant for the business now because I just am like doing emails and
It's like
answering
paperwork, emails.
just
Yeah.
paperwork. Like
Hmm.
like I make labels and do paperwork all day is really what I feel like I'm doing. But for a long time, for months, I felt myself really fighting that and being like, why am I not? I want to be in the shop. I love my kid, of course, but like, I'm like here at home with a baby. I can't go anywhere because COVID, and just really frustrated with this
Yeah.
like space that I'm in, and really frustrated with just my circumstance, and feeling like I need to be in the shop and I need to be doing and doing and doing. And then slowly and gradually, and really quite recently, just like over the last month or two, it just felt like, oh, but this is what you asked for.
Yeah.
Like, but this,
Yeah.
if you pay attention, it's happening right before your eyes. Like you're
Mhm.
living it right now. You are being directed into that next phase of whatever that is. I don't know what it is, but I do know that I've been given more opportunities to have this conversation on like
Mm.
on a platform than I've ever been given before, and that each thing seems to land on someone's ears that then has something else to offer, or a new thing to, again, I'm a learner and I pay attention and I read and I'm here for things,
Yeah. Yeah.
so um I I can't tell you, because I would never have been able to tell you at any point in my life, like, where I'm gonna be 3 years from that point. I just have never known the answer to that.
Same. Same.
Um,
Very much the same. Mhm. People are
um
like, "What are you doing? What are you planning?" I'm like, "I
and
don't
that's
that's not
something
my
that I've
lifestyle."
learned to not to delight in not being able to answer,
Yes.
because whatever ends up happening is, like, way better than whatever I,
Oh my
like,
god,
tell
yeah.
you is gonna happen. It's just way better. Life is good.
It
I don't have to force things into their, like, I don't have to
Yeah.
put the square pegs into the round holes. Like, I'm
Oh,
good
yeah.
to wait for the round peg. I'm good.
I
And
will
then
wait.
it starts happening, and that happening is literally right now, and it's a really exciting moment. I It's a constant thing that I'm reminding myself, because I'll still have those moments of frustration of, like,
Yeah.
I need to be somewhere, I need to be doing something, but a lot of times the magic of that next space is in the pause, right? It's like in
Yes.
the
Oh my
part where
god.
where you feel like nothing is happening and you wanna panic and you wanna press all the buttons and open all the doors and do all the things, when
It's true.
really it's that moment of pause where there's a lot of energetic things, like, going on, and I just believe in that, and
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
seen evidence of it so many times in my life and other people's lives, and in that hindsight picture of, like, I was so upset and da 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 da, but, the transition happens not just from, like, good things or intentional things, but also from difficult things and challenging things, maybe even the greatest transitions of all. So, um,
Absolutely. Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know. I can't tell you, but, um
You know what? I will say it's a trend. I usually ask that question because I want to I need I would love for listeners to hear and understand that not having an answer is an answer. There's this, like, what I've noticed is that in people in our efforts to decolonize our thinking
Mhm,
and kind of remove like white supremacy and Western capitalization and those kinds of things from the center of what we do in the center of our decision making, becomes this thing of like, I'm just going to wait until the universe aligns the next thing. I'm going to
mhm,
wait until, so there's no rush. We're not pushing in the way that like Western culture tells you to push, and you should be in the so, and you should be doing the things, and you should be accomplishing, and you should be producing. And so I noticed that as like specifically as Black women kind of re-engage with who they are, who they come from,
mhm,
and those like really natural instincts that we have about how we like move in the world, how we work,
mhm,
and what we produce for people, and how we're in service to the world. A lot of it is what people would think is slowing down, but
mhm,
I find it to be just like recalibrating yourself to be more purposeful and not, okay, I'm just going to do as many, like, volume is like the center, theme for most of this, where for us it's like value over volume every time. And I think I've been like saying that for the last year or so to like anyone I've had a conversation with, is that I'm finding that like as a person who used to work in marketing full time, that part of your brain never turns off.
mhm,
And so when I look at things, I look at it through that lens still. And so like looking at food and looking at like the scope of the food world right now and how we are engaged in social media and all the other things, what I'm seeing is that people are finally reaching kind of that fever pitch of it's too much.
mhm,
It's a lot. There's so much volume. There's a
mhm,
volume of messages, a volume of people, a volume of values. Like there's just so much that you're buried under.
mhm,
And now the things that are starting to stand out are the things that produce less volume and give you more value. I'm like, once we can, as human beings, realize this is about an exchange of value
mhm,
and not how much can I give you?
mhm,
And I was like, well, give me one thing that's done
mhm.
really well. How about we do that?
I like that.
That's all I want.
I
It's
like
like,
that.
give me the one thing really good and we're in good shape. But yeah, I'm noticing that just in the trends, people are fine because they've had to like slow down
Mhm,
and go, oh, I'm giving you 10 things that are just kind of okay and maybe a little good,
mhm.
when I could be giving you two things that are extraordinary.
Yeah,
And I'm like, how about we all gun for that?
yeah.
Let's all push for that. We keep telling people quality of life means a lot more stuff,
Mm.
when
And that
really quality of life means a lot more time
yeah,
and a lot more value and a
yeah,
lot more like people and quality relationship, because the stuff, everybody's clearing their houses out now. You got
right.
stuck in your house and you realize you had too much stuff and you can't be there and you're just like, Who can I
Yeah.
send this to? How can I throw this out? What can we
Yeah.
do? And so I'm hoping that on the other side of this, that people do not re-engage with this idea of I need more stuff,
Hoping to.
and then like shake that out of their work as well. Kind of
And
like, oh, we
doesn't
don't need
that
super
kind of
duper.
heal some ancestral trauma though of like
Girl,
Black
yes.
women feeling like they have to just give and give and give and give and
Yeah.
support and support and support and support and volume, 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 volume and just like work, 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 work. And if we just like stop
Yeah.
and be like,
Oh my God.
no, actually, I'm gonna do this differently.
Yep.
And I'm going to see what you can offer me, and I'm going to see how I can now reshape my life based on what really is fulfilling.
Yeah.
And if I do what's fulfilling, I know that that's in the best service to those around me, as opposed to just being like, no, I just am a workhorse and I'm just going to do. I mean, that's really dangerous. That's a
It
dangerous
really
road to go
is.
down, and you're not bettering your community at that point. You're just responding to this trauma that is
Yeah.
ingrained in us,
Oh yeah.
but that I do feel is worth healing and able to be healed.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yes.
again, it feels risky because you're then not really responding to the expectations that I feel like we feel like we've profited from, or we feel like we've thrived from if we just do what people expect of us.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen, but
It's
I'm
true,
I'm
yeah.
gonna try this a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that that long arm of slavery. Like you
Yeah,
kind of go, if you weren't considered a human being for 400 years and you were considered part of the economics of a country, you were no more than a dollar bill
yeah,
or a piece of
yeah,
machinery at some point. And so when you finally were emancipated and
yeah,
got this kind of weird pseudo freedom, you weren't considered a human being, though. Like I was like, emancipation did not mean that you became human all of a sudden. It really didn't even mean you became a citizen all of a sudden. Emancipation just means that you were no more a part of the economic system. I was like, slavery was a $9 billion business
mhm,
for a very long time.
mhm,
And so it's like telling them to go into a factory and dismantle everything and shut the factory down.
mhm,
That's literally what emancipation was. That was the proposal.
mhm,
Well, we understand you're making a tremendous amount of money from this and that you are extremely wealthy because of these people,
mhm,
but we are asking you to just burn all of that to the ground.
right, right,
Doesn't mean like they granted us citizenship, doesn't mean that they granted us humanity.
no,
It was something we have to now recapture. And I think a lot of what we do and how we work and how we think about our lives and our value is still caught up in this idea that we are like cogs in a wheel.
yeah.
And to reclaim this idea, like to decolonize your brain a little bit
New
around,
emancipation.
yes, and like let's
It's a
really get into,
redo.
yeah, like let's get some real emancipation going on
Yeah,
here and like emancipate yourself from the idea that you are nothing more than a piece of machinery.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
yeah. Well, ma'am, I am, because I always tell people like I can talk to all of my guests for a very long time. But you have a child to get back to and a day to continue. And so I just want to say thank you so much for hopping on. It has been an absolute pleasure
Oh,
to pick
my
your brain
pleasure.
and talk to you.
Totally.
And yes, and I will, you know what the thing is, I'm gonna be reckless enough to order those figs again. Cashews and all, y'all. Trust me. It's worth it. It's worth it. If she's prepared to send them to me, I'm prepared to buy them. So, so yeah. But for the time that we have where you are producing such beautiful products in the world, I am deeply grateful. And for me, I'm not one to go, you need to do this for the rest of your life. I am not that person. What I am I will be that person who is extremely grateful that you've decided to do it right now. And when that time ends, it ends, and we know that whatever you do next will be as brilliant and beautiful as it is now. So yeah, so thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. All right, let me hit this stop button.